I'd like to welcome everyone today. Thanks for coming to How the Data Hub Works under the hood with product engineers. My name is Shannon Bayatpour, and I'm a product manager for Data Hub. I'm here with Alex Abadarad, who's our lead engineer, and Mike Woldridge, who's the engineer and the designer on our team. So today I want to talk to you about three things. We're going to talk about why you should use Data Hub. You're going to see how Data Hub works. You're going to see it in action through a demo. And then we're going to explain more about, under the surface, what's happening, what Data Hub does for you. So Data Hub is our product that runs on top of MarkLogic, and it helps you configure and maintain your integration according to our best practices. So Mike is actually going to show you through a demo, a real-world scenario, how Data Hub, how easy it is to configure and set up your integration using Data Hub. And then Alex is going to take you behind the scenes to really show you things that we do for you, such as capture provenance information and kind of how our configuration is stored. So with that, you should leave kind of understanding more about how Data Hub works and having seen a real demo. So Data Hubs take in data from multiple sources and integrate them to create a 360-degree view that's then accessible to all your downstream applications. So organizations need a 360-degree view for these reasons, and they need a view that's actionable, real-time, governed, and they need this, and MarkLogic provides all these things, but what Data Hub adds to that is that it's the fastest and easiest way to configure and maintain this integration. So I'll kind of highlight three things that I want you to kind of look out for. Is really our Quick Start UI for development that comes with Data Hub, and it's a point-and-click interface that helps you get started faster and configure your integration easily, and also provides just a window into really even visualizing what your integration looks like and what's really happening behind the scenes. Everything is configuration-driven, so you're defining settings for how you want your integration to behave. You're not actually coding everything from scratch. And it's governed by default, so we're doing things such as tracking provenance information for you, so you can really understand what happened when what happened during this transformation and who kicked it off, and just more context to kind of help you even trust your data more, so that you understand where it's derived from and all the processes that happen that might have changed that data. So during the demo that Mike's going to do for you, it's going to be for a company we're going to call Sunrise Insurance, and it's a scenario in which an insurance company acquires two competitors, Bedrock and Advantage is what we're going to call them, and with those new acquisitions came new data silos. So Sunrise has existing downstream applications that they want to use, and they want to be able to integrate the data from these acquisitions so they can power those applications. So one thing we encourage people to do as they're starting and defining their integration project is to really identify up front what their business needs are and what their business problem is that they're trying to solve. So in this case, Sunrise is going to integrate just enough data to power their policy verification system. So to verify policies, you need to know certain information about customers. And so what they really need is a 360-degree customer view. And so this is what Mike's going to show you how to define. So real-world challenges, just like most integrations, they tried ETL previously. That project was unsuccessful. New team members are coming on board. They need to understand the technology quickly and understand the business requirements. Also, some data quality issues in particular that I want to point out is that they know that from these two acquisitions, there were customers who were customers at both these companies. So that means that there's duplicate customer data, duplicate customer records that they're going to want to identify and then possibly merge those records when they find that the same customer, that they have two records for the same customer. So we're going to show you how to do that as well. So our integration, you can think of it in 4 phases. So the first phase, and Mike's going to kind of show you and outline how to actually do this in Data Hub. The first phase is really getting that data in, and with MarkLogic, you can take it in as is, no schema required. The second stage is our curation phase, and this is where you create that 360-degree view, which we're going to show you how to do, and also where you improve your data, the quality of the data, say by identifying duplicates and aligning that. And then you have that curated data, you can then build APIs to access that data. So that's kind of outlining what we're going to show today. And we're going to really dig deep into that curation aspect. We're going to show you how to get the data in using Data Hub, but then we're going to show you how to curate that data. And a key element of that process is our model that you create. So your model that you'll create, we call them entity models, defines the way that you expect your data to be in that 360-degree view. So here you've defined the properties, exactly how you want your properties to be, and then the data types associated with those properties. And once you define your model, that really, that is what drives the curation process. That's what allows you to create that 360-degree view, and then again, merge duplicate data as well. So now we're going to take a look at the source data. So here's an example of the data coming from an Advantage customer, and you see that the property names on that side do not match the property names in our model. So that's something that we'll rectify during the curation process. And again, you'll see the property names and the format of the data is very different in the second, coming from the second acquisition as well. So, so the way that we create that 360-degree view is through our mapping process. So our mapping process harmonizes your data to create that 360-degree view. And that's a view, it's based on a model. And then once you have that view, it's consistently queryable. And this is what allows it to be accessible to your downstream applications. And so Mike's going to go into detail and show you actually how to create this mapping and run it. And then the second problem, once we have our data harmonized and created that 360-degree view, then it becomes much easier to identify and merge duplicate data because everything's now in the same format. So here you see two records, and these might have come from originally different sources, but they look the same now because they're in the 360-degree view. And you'll see, okay, first name, last name, and email is the same. There are some characteristics such as phone number and address that are not the same, but we can decide and we can create rules to decide that, okay, if these three things are the same, we're going to merge them into one record. And so we're going to show you how to do that. And the way we do that, we call it through our mastering process. So our mastering process leverages our smart mastering framework, which is now fully integrated into Data Hub. So it's now totally, completely a part of Data Hub now. And this is what matches and merges duplicate data. So yes, so during the demo, Mike's going to show you how to get data in MarkLogic, create a model for your curation, and then he's going to show you how to map it to create that 360-degree view, and then use mastering to find and merge duplicate data. So with that, I'll let Mike take it over.
Thanks, Shannon. Apologies in advance for my voice. I kind of woke up with no voice at all, but I got something here. Hopefully it will carry through. So I'm going to show you how to create, rich, complex data integration flows using Quick Start. And it's our graphical user interface to the Data Hub. It runs in a web browser and lets you ingest, bring data into MarkLogic, map that data as Shannon described, and also master that data all in one, single system. So before we jump into it, let's just review a few concepts. You're going to be creating flows in Quick Start. And a flow is comprised of one or more data integration steps. And it can be simple. It can just involve a single step. Maybe you're just using a flow to ingest data, or it may have multiple steps, as in here on the diagram below, where you're bringing in data via an ingestion step, mapping it, and then mastering it in one fell swoop. And once you've created your flow, you can run it via Quick Start and review your data, see what came out of your flow, or you can orchestrate. You can run that via some other way, via ML Gradle API, or even a third-party orchestration tool like MuleSoft. The other key concept is steps, right? A flow is made up of steps. The out-of-the-box steps we offer is an ingestion step, brings data in as is in various formats. A mapping step, which allows conversion of your properties to that entity that Shannon talked about. And then it can also leverage the smart mastering framework, and basically deduplicate your data, make it cleaner, richer, more valuable. If you want to do something else, we also offer custom steps that you can point to scripts that you've loaded into MarkLogic, and you can do anything else you want to do in code, be it enrich your data, validate your data, and so forth. All right, so for our demo, right, we're going to be a fictitious insurance situation. We're bringing in customer data sets from Advantage Insurance and another customer data set from Bedrock Insurance. And we're going to create flows to ingest the data, map the data, and then finally master it. And with that, we will switch over. All right, great. All right, so when you open up Quick Start,
Oh, we can't see it.
oh, the okay.
Great.
All right, so when you open up Quick Start, you'll be presented with a dashboard, and this is giving you an overview of the different databases associated with your data hub. There's a staging database where your data is going to be ingested into, a final database where your map data is going to be saved and your master data will be saved, a final database for that, and then a jobs database which holds metadata about the flows that you've run, as well as provenance information that's going to track the data as it moves in, through your flows. And Alex is going to dive a little deeper into what provenance data is all about. So let's go to the flows view. And this is where you're going to manage your flows, create your flows, and that's what we'll be doing now. In the interest of time, I've already created an Advantage flow, which is ingesting our Advantage data and then mapping that data to our canonical entity. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing for our Bedrock data. We're gonna ingest it and then map it. So let's go back to our Managed Flows view and create a new flow for Bedrock. Name it Bedrock Flow. Keep our advanced settings as is. These are settings you can tweak for performance. And now we have a Bedrock Flow, and we can jump in and create some steps. First step we want to add is an ingestion step. Let's do that. Name it. Keep our advanced settings the same. So we'll be loading data into our staging database of our data hub. Great. Now we can configure our ingestion flow by specifying where the data we're ingesting is. It's in a Bedrock subdirectory. Specify that. It's coming in as CSV data. So let's choose CSV as our source type, and everything else can stay as is. So typically when you're building flows, it's going to be an iterative process. You create a step, you want to test it, make sure you're getting what you expected, or go back and tweak the settings and go from there. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to ingest the data and make sure we get what we expected. So I'm going to run it, run our flow. Right now it's just a one-step flow. And we finish that flow, and we can dive into the job details. And this is information about the flow we just ran. Everything looks okay. There's no failure notices, no error notices. If there were, we could jump in and see information about what might have gone wrong. But everything went okay, and we just ingested 500 records under the committed column. And we can take a look at those records by clicking the number there, and it takes us to our Browse Data view, where we can jump in and look at one ingested document to see if what we got. So we've loaded it in JSON format. It's within an envelope property, and we'll see this data evolve as we then map it and also master it. It's going to stay within the envelope with additional metadata added, etc. So now we're going to add a mapping step to that flow, okay? And before we go and actually create that mapping step, we'll need to have an entity to map to, and this is what we've done here in the entities view. We've created a customer entity, that's our canonical entity, that we're going to map to, that we're going to master to, and it has the properties for the Sunrise Insurance customer data types, and also some indexes applied. Okay, great. We can go back to our Bedrock flow and now add a mapping step. We'll name it, and then we're going to specify the source that we're mapping from. So we want to specify that ingested data, and we can do that by selecting Bedrock Ingest as our collection. So as data moves through the steps, collection tags are applied, and that's how you can reference them in steps that occur later. And our target entity is our customer that we just saw. We'll keep the advanced settings as is. We're pulling from our staging database, writing to our final database. All right. And now we can configure the mapping. So let's go through. So on the left side, we have our source information based on a sample document. The URI is listed up there. And on the right, we have our customer properties. And we can go through and do our mapping. Insurance ID maps to ID, etc. First name to first name. Last name to last name. Zip maps to postal. Our source documents don't have phone information. We leave that blank. That's okay. We have email, the PIN number, and then lastly, last updated information. We'll be actually using that value when we master the data. So let's run our mapping now, just as we ran our ingest previously. We don't have to do our ingestion. We can deselect that. We can run steps individually if we need to, or all at once. All right, and that quickly finished. We have a finished status up in the header. Again, we can click in and see that we got 500 mapped documents, and we can look at them in the Browse Data view. So let's take a look at one of those documents. So up on top, we have the result of the mapping. We have our customer entity properties, as we hoped we would. Everything looks good. And below, we have the original information from our ingested documents. So we're keeping the original and the result side by side with in our JSON here. So we're going to create one more flow here to master data from those two initial flows. So we're going to take the Advantage data and the Bedrock data, and all in one, run a mastering step on that. Let's create a new flow. Name that flow. Again, we can keep those settings as is. And let's jump in and add a mastering step. It'll be a one-step flow here. Name it. And when specifying our source here, we're going to do a little bit differently since we have to reference data from those two initial flows. We can do that by just writing a simple little query here, a collection query, that references those two collections and brings everything in together. Again, we're mastering to the customer entity, and we're taking data from final and going to be writing it to final. And you can adjust those depending on the workflow that you want. All right, so let's do our mastering configuration. So mastering happens in two phases. There's a matching phase that goes through all the source records and compares them and determines which ones have a high enough similarity to consider merging. And then there's a merging phase where, okay, if documents matched, how are you going to do the merge? You may have more than one property value. Do you keep all of them? Do you keep just one? So that's what we're going to do in the merging part. So let's create some matching options. So the first property we're going to check is first name. What if we see matching first name in a couple of documents? We're going to apply a weight of 5 to that comparison, and become clear what that means when we add a few more. So let's create a second matching check for last name. Now last name is a little more identifying, so we're going to give that a slightly higher weight. Let's give it a weight of 10. Let's create one more option, and that'll be for email. So email's even more identifying. If two customers share the same email, there's a pretty good chance that they're the same person. So we'll create an email match option and give that a weight of 20. So we're looking for exact matches here. There are other algorithms you can use that look for synonyms, for words that sound alike, and you can also write your custom algorithms for matching and reference them in your match option. So paired with your options is a threshold setting. And that's going to set some thresholds that determine if we get a total weight above a certain value, we're going to want to match these documents. So we're going to create a definite match threshold, set a weight. Let's set it at 25. And we're going to say if a match sees 25 or more, we're going to automatically merge it. We could also just select notify, and that's going to create a notification document in our database that a human can go through and determine whether these documents that were flagged should actually be merged or not. And again, you have an option of creating a custom threshold algorithm that does something completely different. Okay, so with this, our matching is complete, and let's move on to merging. So like I mentioned, when you're merging multiple documents, how are you going to merge that information? Do you want to keep everything from the documents that you're merging, or do you want to just keep specific information? And how do you determine what information to keep? So first off, let's create a match option for postal, for postal codes. Let's say we just want to keep a single code off of the documents we're merging. And let's say we want to favor longer postal codes, favor 9-digit zip codes over 5-digit ones. We can do that by setting a length weight of greater than 0. That's what we're going to do here. So that's our first option. And if you don't set an option for a property, it just keeps all the information as an array in the JSON. So we want to keep a single ID, and let's also keep a single last updated timestamp. So I didn't give any more details for the ID or updated, but we can determine what ID and updated value is going to be kept by actually setting a timestamp path. And that allows us to basically say, keep information from newer documents rather than older documents. And by setting the timestamp path that references a timestamp in the documents, we can do that. So I know our updated path has that information, and I'm going to set that here. So newer values are going to be kept for, or the newest value is going to be kept for that single value for ID and updated. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to set a custom merge collection that's going to be applied to documents that have been merged. So there's some default collection tags that get added. This just allows us to tweak those, add additional ones, replace some. We're going to add customer merge to all the documents that get merged. And that just makes it easy for us to review it later, and we'll see. All right. So with that done, we can now run our mastering flow. Okay, that quickly finished. There's a finished status up in the header there. We can click through once again to review the job details. And we see 100 documents have been looked at by the mastering step and committed. And that makes sense because I know there are 500 customers we're bringing in from Advantage and 500 from Bedrock. So we can click through to check our data, and we can filter that data using that customer merge tag for convenience. So it looks like we found 2 matches, and we created there were those merged documents for each of those. And we can look at one of those. And here we see we found a customer in the Advantage data set and a customer in the Bedrock data set that were determined to be the same customer based on our settings. And there's more metadata up top. There's some semantic triples that describe the data and how it was merged. And out at the bottom, we can see the result. So we see we have a single ID and a single updated value, which is what we'd expect. It looks like we matched on first name, last name, and email since there's single values there. We have a postal code that's 9 digits, so that's what we'd hope if they were comparing lengths. And then we've kept information for PIN and phone from the 2 documents, so everything looks good. So returning to our Managed Flows view. So just go over what we just did. We created 2 flows. We ingested data from 2 data sets from Advantage and Bedrock, brought them into our data hub, and then mastered them all at once with a separate customer mastering flow. So I'm going to turn over to Alex now. He's going to lift up the covers and show you the code and data structures that supported all this.
Can you flip it back to that?
Oh, yeah, wait.
Everyone's seen this before? All right, how Data Hub works. Thanks, Mike. So we're going to go into what Mike just did. So the first thing we're going to undergo is flows. Everyone saw Mike build one live in front of you. But here, I have a question for anyone out here. What is a flow really? On the screen, you saw it look like that, right? But that's just the UI. So what is this thing actually building? It's actually a JSON declaration underneath the hood. So it's a configuration. It's a configuration at its most core of what you would like to do on the MarkLogic server with the data that you're asking. It is a logical definition. Those are flows, files on a disk. Each one of them is loaded into the MarkLogic server and is accessible universally throughout the cluster. So what does it do? It declares. It's a specific set of steps that you'd like to take place on the MarkLogic cluster. So let's take an example flow. If you remember, our example flow had customer data that was from the Advantage and Bedrock groups. And what we wanted to do with that effective flow is load data as is. We wanted to map it to the customer entity model, our entity definition. And then we wanted to masterize it, master it so that you had a set of known good customer entities. So let's talk about the anatomy of a flow at the flow level. This is what the top of that flow level Advantage flow document was that you saw. And at the very top, there's some flow descriptors. Name, obviously, and then a human readable description to let you know what it is. How you identify the flow is by the name. There's some default orchestration that is provided here that will be at the flow level. And here it's talking about thread count and batch size. This is for performance tuning and optimization. And then we have some flow level default options to be passed as it runs through the steps. So I just mentioned steps. So wait, now what are steps? I just went from flow and now I'm talking about steps. You saw steps here represented like this, right? And they're represented in the kind of what they do, the ingestion, the mapping, the mastering, and then your own custom. But what a step is a discrete operation that takes place transactionally on the MarkLogic cluster. The point of a step is that MarkLogic will perform some action in a transaction for you. And several of these will constitute the flow. So when you run a flow, you're actually running a series of steps. So let's look at what a step is. So inside the flow document, you're going to have steps. So at the step level, we'll start from the top. That's the bottom of, top of here was the bottom of the previous page with the key steps. They're order-based. That's the primary key to the step. It's number 2. So can anybody guess what order this is running in? It's the second one, right? Yeah. But we have some other additional information here. We've said what step definitions do we want to run. You might notice here it's default mapping. That's the one we ship with the product. And it's going to be of type mapping. This is important because this is now defining what type of action is about to take place on the data that you're about to process. Additionally, we have some top-level orchestration settings for this step that are different than the flow level. So for this step, we want to only use 100 batches, 100 as our batch size, and then we only want to use 4 threads. And we, most importantly, do not retry. If something fails, let it on the floor. And finally, we have step-specific options. So the next slide, options. Voila. What is an option? Well, an option actually provides information to the step. This is passed in during runtime. So this is what it tells the step and how to perform the action on the MarkLogic server. This is a little bit different than the orchestration information with batches and retries and things like that. This is now taking place completely on the MarkLogic server. Steps are self-recognized. This means that if you pass information in the step doesn't care about, it's going to ignore it. This also means if you pass in information that is missing or is invalid, the step will throw an error to you. We have some universal steps, universal options and steps, such as source database. You saw Mike setting this earlier. Collections, advantage map. This is when it gets processed, it'll be tagged with the advantage map collection. The source collection that we drew it from, this is the collection that Mike picked out there, the advantage ingest, and the target database. Where am I going? Simple, right? These are available in all steps. But we also have some specific ones here. These are to the mapping one. When he created that mapping in the advantage flow, he's actually creating an advantage map that has a version number on it that is actually kept as an artifact. So we know what was used at the time when you ran this to map your files. Additionally, options can be supplied at runtime, either through Gradle, Java API, or HTTP. And we do have an order of precedent going from most specific to least specific. So runtime, you provide options, they overwrite, and then it falls back to the step declaration, which is more specific to the step, which is then more specific, more general to the flow, and then finally the system defaults. So those all concatenate together in that order of priority and are executed. This allows you to have general options that are passed in with every step, and then more specific options for this specific invocation or this specific step. So now let's talk about orchestration. I just went over these are the declarative artifacts. How does it kind of work? So orchestration is actually external to the MarkLogic cluster. This is very important because the steps, when we do it, we actually perform them in batches. And I'll get to that in a minute. But why external? So that we can fit into any data integration environment that you have. This also means you can bring your own tools or use ours. And what do I mean by that? I mean, can you talk to HTTP? Can you run a command line? If so, you can actually start using the MarkLogic Data Hub today. And lastly, our flows are actually multi-tool compatible now. So if you use perhaps one of our tools to ingest data or one of our tools to harmonize and run, you can use another tool to continue that flow later on. An example would be very just high level, using our MLCP tool to pump data into the database for an ingest step, and then proceeding to have MuleSoft at any point to continue orchestrating the flow beyond that first step. So let's actually walk through what actually happened. When Mike hit run, on the UI screen, he's actually going to go through this. So first, we're starting off with a set of raw documents that we're going to bring into the system. Then we're going to build a flow, which is a logical declaration of what we're about to do. Then we're going to fill that flow with 3 steps. You've seen these, ingestion, mapping, mastering. If you guys don't know these words yet. So what happens when we actually say, hey, take these documents and run them through this flow? Well, it's going to look into step number 1. And it's going to say, hey, I need to ingest these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a job. A job is a specific invocation of a flow that will last the life cycle of this flow. Then from there, it'll create batches. These batches are transactional operations that occur on the cluster. So one step will have many, many batches. And additionally, you're going to get provenance on every document that goes through. So that'll also be generated. At the end of this step, you will have documents in the MarkLogic cluster with batch information, and the flow will have completed step number 1. When pulled again for status, it will say attempted step 1, completed step 1. So what does that mean? Now it's time to start step number 2. And it'll do the same exact thing, and then the same thing again. At this stage, now, what do we have at the end of this? Now we have documents that are ready for the final database that are mastered, and we know they're good customer entities. This is the end result of a flow. A flow is a set of multi-steps that takes place in order to curate and expose your data in the way that you want it. So how do we track that under the hood? Well, we have what are called job-level documents. A job is a flow-level attempt. So it's the invocation of an entire flow. It contains a summary of actions. So this is a truncated document here, but you can imagine for each one of these steps it goes quite deep. And in here, it actually showcases what the last attempted step was, what the status was, when did you start, when did you finish, and then as well as what it attempted in each one of the steps. The summation of that is the flow progress. How do I know what I'm going, how far I'm through? It is the source of truth about the job. It is a single source of truth about the job in the MarkLogic cluster. And since this is ACID transactional, you're guaranteed that multiple tools reading from the same flow can know what job is at what state, at what time, with guaranteed accuracy. And finally, the job ID is the primary key for this. This little guy right here, you can pass around, and this is how you refer to all the documents that were going through that one invocation of the flow, aka the job. So just as we have jobs, we now have batches, which are the step-level attempts. These are the individual batches that take place on the individual hosts on the cluster. They are completely step-level. They contain very detailed information actually about what's gone on. So as you can see here, these are the URIs that have been operated on. These are the right timestamp of when data was written. This is the request timestamp when it ran. First host time ended, the host name, everything you can imagine, including the options that were passed in, and what module was used to run this step, to execute at least the entry point. That gives us a complete snapshot. So if we want to look back and see what ran on that host, when that ran, we have all the information right there. And this is available to your external orchestrators. When you aggregate all these for an individual step, I'll take questions at the end. When you aggregate all these it gives you the progress of a step, because the orchestrator knows how many batches and it knows what it needs to do, so how many of these have completed. And finally, there's a primary key of a batch ID for this specific batch. And the foreign key, if you want to think of it in a relational term, foreign key for this is the job ID, because that's what it's part of. Which gets us to our last one. If you notice, we went from flow level to step level, now we're at the document level. Provenance. So what do we do when we track provenance? For visual sake, I've truncated this down to one action, one provenance recording. It's document level. So every time you touch a document, when you modify a document, you're going to get one of these. And it's going to contain a summary of actions about that document. Obviously, with Smart Mastering, you get more granularity because it's merging properties, and you need to be able to track that to unwind it. For mapping, it's going to be a little more simple. But it answers the W's. And here's what I mean it answers the W. This is a doc updated operation. So this document was updated. It's now present at this location, this URI. It's attributed to the admin who ran it, the user. It was generated by a specific provenance ID before this. This is the staging data. It was derived from another document. It was in the default mapping, and it was associated with the advantage flow. So you get a complete 360 about all this. So when you run it through, you'll get dozens of these for your documents that then you can aggregate together and show the full life cycle of what happened. And lastly, we track this all through document URI. So if the document URI stays the same across staging and final, which it does here, they'll be the same, but not necessarily always. This is how you can rename your data and still keep track of it. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Shannon to wrap it all up for you.
All right, so I'm just going to kind of take us back to kind of an overview. When you think of how you do things with MarkLogic Data Hub, you can think of it in terms of configuration-driven flows and steps. So if you need to get data into MarkLogic, that's a flow with an ingestion step. You need to create a 360-degree view. That's a mapping step that's part of your flow. A mastering step, if you need to improve your data quality by finding matches among your data and merging them into the same record. Or a custom step if you need to do something else. So you should have a better sense now of all the ways that Data Hub is faster and easier in terms of integrating your data. You've seen the flows with the out-of-the-box steps, as Mike showed you. Default provenance tracking, as Alex explained, we're tracking data about where, when and why, how your data changed over time. Load as is, no schema required. And then you saw the mapping configuration and the smart mastering configuration in Quick Start. So Data Hub 5.0, this is, you've seen Data Hub 5, kind of all the new features in Data Hub 5, which just released a few days ago on Friday. So I just definitely encourage you to check it out. You can download it from GitHub today. And try it out, try it with Quick Start. That's probably the easiest way to get started, and give us your feedback. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. Thank you. All right. Oh, I guess, yeah, I think, yeah. You guys want to come? Oh.
Test? Yeah.
Okay.
We saw that we can do custom matching steps. Can you explain what kind of environment is that and what we can use to write custom matching algorithms? So what is the input? What kind of queries can we do for the custom matching?
So there, on? Yes, okay. You can actually do almost any imperative function that you'd like to do for that. Keep in mind performance though when you're doing that. However, yes, you can do complex matching algorithms and things like that. This is transactional though, so I encourage, don't try to attempt analytical runs during a real-time pull, but you can definitely get your own custom if-else logic very deep. And you can incorporate your own library and then expose a bunch of things out through the library based on function calls, and then that whole developer stack if you'd wish to. You can do the same for merge strategies, actually.
And
you don't.
is the custom matching based on one document URI, or is it called once for the whole collection?
With smart mastering, it's both. It's first called by the batch of all the documents you want to match on, and then it goes one by one. So if that makes sense to you, because it runs a little different than like a mapping. A mapping is obviously one document in, one document out, or multiple documents out if you're splitting them, or multiple documents in, one document out. But it's very much isolated on the individual transaction for the document. Smart mastering is about actually taking one document, scanning everything that you have that matches, and then merging it back. Because and to take this consideration into effect, I have 3 that are in the same batch. They're all the same. I have to be able to merge them A to B, and then B, and then what AB is to C. I don't do A to B to C and then come out. I do it in the proper order. So that's. Does that help you?
Thank you very much.
Okay, and then I just want to clarify. I think you're asking how you would do a custom matching or merging option from the interface. So you can't code it in Quick Start, but you can create the module outside of Quick Start and then reference it from the Quick Start UI. So it actually does allow you to choose that from Quick Start.
Yeah, it's an advanced option. Deeper down in it.
You mentioned asset compliance earlier, and you mentioned asset compliance earlier. What's the logical unit of work there? So if something fails for whatever reason, how much do we actually roll back? Is it the entire flow? Is it the step? Is it the batch?
The batch, and it will tell you exactly what failed and if you would like to retry again. And it might sound kind of funny, but retrying is important to tell the orchestrator to either keep it going or not. Mm-hmm. So that's why you see the retry in there, but it's batch level.
What's the performance impact if users are reading while you're doing this work?
So there's obviously an eNode evaluation that takes place before we start doing updates. So inside of our flow on the batch levels, everything you see that runs in a step actually runs in a read transaction unless forced into an update transaction, which is only acquiring read locks then at that point. And then at the end, a separate transaction is opened up to do all the writes in one batch. So it minimizes the amount of impact. But if you obviously wanted to keep SLAs very high performant on your nodes, let's say for consumption of data, you might want to spin up some E-nodes and have those be what people hit for the accessibility of the data, and allow the ED nodes to crunch the data in the background to alleviate any concerns about, pegging down your cluster. Data Hub Service does this for you automatically by scaling different parts of the stack.
Do you have a scheduler built into this? So if you were looking at bringing in ERP data on a daily basis, can this be scheduled? So you've done your mapping, you've done your setups, and you just want it to run on a daily basis.
Can your external orchestrator do a scheduler? Can you do a cron job? Then the answer is yes.
Okay, so this can be scripted.
Yes, and you don't have to go from the start of the flow to the end of the flow. You can jump ahead or behind, or you can run the flow, and it'll only pick up what's been processed if you use the job ID in the previous steps. So yes, you can actually schedule the flow, different steps in the flow to run at different time from different orchestration environments.
Quick follow-up.
Yeah.
The source systems, can they be relational tables?
Sure, if you pull them and turn them into denormalized or relatively denormalized figures. So the easiest way to do that is just to CSV dump them. But you can also turn them into your own JSON documents or your own XML and put them in.
Quick question about configuration management. So if you're developing this on a developer instance or a staging instance, how do you elevate these configuration files and kind of keep them source controlled and whatnot?
That's awesome, because you just answered that question. They're source controlled. So when you go to deploy the project, it's actually a package. It's a version of your data hub that goes on there as the configuration. We track that configuration. I maybe didn't make it clear, but actually all those flow declarations that you put in there are actually content objects that we track with Provenance as well. So what did your flow look like 2 months ago when you ran this in this particular transaction? We could pull that back out for you.
So is there do they get checked into Git or something like that, or is it
For your own source control version, yes. And then
Okay.
when you're ready, you pull it back out, do your UAT on it, and then push to your production, or staging, then production cluster.
Awesome, thanks.
Yes.
How does talk about logical rollback? How does that work? So let's say a batch failed, right, in a step or a job, and you want you've already changed the target entity at that point. You want to roll it back. I'm sure you didn't. You have features there that allow you to roll back.
So if the batch fails, nothing in that batch gets committed. It's a complete ACID rollback. The transaction, as if never took place.
So everything from the beginning of the flow has to be redone.
No, the batch. So when I say the batch, the flow's been running. You're in step now number 2. You're on batch 50 of 5,000. Batch 50 fails. Only batch 50 fails. The rest of it continues chugging on.
Right, but then you've got dependencies, right? So let's say if my batch for the curation failed, and then I've got merge next, then I've got mastering next.
The only time those documents will not be pushed on to the next step because the
Sequential.
Yes, it's sequential. So this is, if for those of you looking to do micro batching, one document all the way through really quickly, it works just the same. If it stops at any point in the, it doesn't go through to the end.
It was the smart mastering. You were setting weights. How do you determine what weights to set when you're trying to dedupe?
So it's kind of based on, so it's really gives you a lot of control because you get to decide what you get to set a threshold of first like what a match is. So maybe you decide, oh, I want the match threshold to be 50. Well, that means anything somebody gets, sometimes if the combination of the match scores reaches 50, then it's going to be decide that it's a match. So really that threshold then kind of determines maybe how much you want to weight each individual piece, because you have a lot of control over how you define what you want that match to be.
Is there a maximum?
No.
There's no maximum.
So you can put like 3,000 in and then later on 5 million if you really want. Also important that you can have levels of merge strategy that occur. So if I get to 100, you're going to merge that. If I get to 80, throw a notification, or if I get to 80, only take this takes priority over that document. You can do that all the way down. So sometimes we do have customers that will have 10, 20, and then you'll see like 21.
I have a question with the ACID transaction. What do you do with the managed triples?
So managed triples would be written out. So these are all unmanaged triples inside the documents.
If one of my step is to generate managed triples, what
So
will I?
those would take place in a separate transaction at the same time that the actual query is run. So we do have a custom hook option, which I didn't get into here, but that allows you to escape out the trapdoor from the writing and commit them in a parallel transaction for something quick like managed triples like that. That then, if the main document doesn't write, you can they'll be rolled back automatically at the end of it.
One more question.
If you want to integrate some custom code, do you support calls to API calls to custom applications within a batch step?
Yes, step is nothing more than a piece of custom code effectively that runs inside of a transaction where we provide to you the content and the options. The content being a document with .value, .uri, .context. So you can do anything you want in there, including importing your own libraries completely in.
Yeah, so you would create a custom step.
And that's all cached for you per batch. So once you invoke it the first time, in that whole batch, you get a high performance after that.
Excellent. Thank you.
If you want to do one more question, and then there'll be 15 minutes until the next session starts. So.
Okay, so who's got the most important question? No.
Yeah, there's something.
Oh.
Thank you. Oh, yes, the other gentleman asked about the scheduled jobs to run these steps on a schedule. Well, my question is, can you run these steps in real time, like ingestion, mapping, and mastering? Can you do that real time?
So real time, in MarkLogic world, everything's transactional. So what you mean? Do you want to go right to the final database without preserving any data previously? Just, I mean, I want to. If it doesn't go all the way through ingestion mapping mastering, don't write it. Or do you mean I want to insert it one document in ingestion, then quickly pick it up, go into mapping, quickly pick it up, and go into mastering?
That's right. I could get the documents from a Kafka topic. Right?
Yes.
I want it to be ingested, mapped, and mastered in real time.
Yes, one after the other, a batch of one, and then tell it to run. And you can actually. Just full disclosure, you can actually provide the specific URIs to a specific step to run. You don't actually have to do a particular query in advance if you know what you're wanting to do. So yes, you can do a batch of one, and then that'll just go through lightning fast, or as fast as it will, as many steps as you have.
So should we use the Data Hub framework or should the content processing framework?
Data Hub framework. Content processing framework is not for orchestration of transactional steps that depend on each other. And for the reason just being that it's actually only activates once every minute. It's MarkLogic's own internal scheduler. You want something in a few seconds. So you have to use the Data Hub. Does anybody else have any really burning questions? If so, I'll actually be out there after this and you can come grab me.
Yeah, but I would say, encourage you to visit us at the Data Hub service booth. So there's always, people from Data Hub there ready to answer your questions and talk to you more. So please visit us there. Give us your feedback on GitHub. Just always interested to know what you're thinking. So thank you.
Okay, next session starts in 10 minutes. And please remember to fill out your session reviews on the MarkLogic World app. Thank you.